I am 93 years old, and my life's work is currently sitting in a storage unit, or perhaps in the trash of a house I no longer own. For 6 decades, I was the heartbeat of a family, the one who turned a house into a home. But today, I am just a ghost in a nursing facility hallway. I remember the exact moment the betrayal started. It wasn't a fight or a scream. It was a quiet, polite conversation over tea. My children, the ones whose first words I celebrated like a festival, were now using those same voices to negotiate my exit from their lives. They spoke about safety and professional care, but their eyes were already looking past me at the empty space I would soon leave behind. They didn't see a mother anymore. They saw a problem that needed a solution. I agreed to go because I loved them more than I loved my own dignity, and that was my first mistake. The car ride was the longest journey of my life. I watched the familiar trees and the local grocery store fade away, replaced by streets I didn't recognize. The silence in the car was so thick I could hardly breathe, yet no one turned on the radio. The guilt was too loud for music. When we pulled up to the facility, it didn't look like a hospital. It looked like a hotel where no one ever checks out. I walked inside, leaning on the arm of the son I once carried for miles when he was tired, and I realized he was now hurrying his pace to get this over with. The paperwork was signed with a cheap plastic pen, a few cold signatures that officially erased my status as a family member and turned me into a resident. They promised to visit every weekend. They promised to call every night. But as I watched their car disappear from the parking lot, I felt a chill in my bones that had nothing to do with the weather. The first month was a lesson in the cruelty of time. I kept my suitcase packed, sitting on the edge of the bed every morning, certain that the guilt would eventually bring them back. I watched the clock, counting every tick like a heartbeat, waiting for a phone that stayed silent. I saw other elderly people around me, eyes vacant and spirits broken, and I told myself, I'm not like them, my children love me. But silence is a brutal teacher. By day 200, I stopped packing my suitcase. I started noticing how the staff only knew my name because of the plastic band on my wrist. I watched the seasons change through a window that didn't open, realizing that the world was moving on, and I was just a footnote in a story that had already moved to the next chapter. For 427 days, I lived in the shadow of tomorrow until I realized that for people like me, tomorrow is just a repeat of a lonely today. That's when the fire finally lit up in my soul, and I decided I wasn't going to die waiting for a permission slip to live. The 427th morning didn't bring a visitor, but it brought a moment of clarity that was sharper than any blade. I looked at the photograph on my nightstand, a family portrait from 10 years ago, and I realized those people no longer existed. The children in that frame were gone, replaced by strangers who found my existence inconvenient. I didn't cry. I didn't pray. I simply stood up and put on my coat. I walked past the nurse's station, my heart thumping against my chest like a trapped bird, but I kept my gaze fixed on the exit. When the automatic doors slid open, I expected an alarm to go off, or for someone to grab my shoulder, but the world didn't care. I walked out into the sunlight, and for the first time in over a year, I felt the wind on my face, a cold, honest wind that didn't smell like antiseptic or old age. I walked until my legs burned, passing by houses with flickering TVs and families sitting down for dinner, invisible to everyone. I reached a small park and sat on a bench, watching the city pulse with life. I saw a man shouting into his phone about a business deal and a teenager laughing with friends, and I realized the most terrifying truth of all. The world is built on the speed of the young, and it has no brakes for the old. My children weren't monsters. They were just products of a world that teaches us to discard anything that slows us down. I looked at my empty hands and finally understood that my life wasn't over because they left. It was over because I had made them my only reason to live. We spend our best years pouring our souls into vessels that eventually walk away, forgetting to keep some of that soul for ourselves. I didn't go to a phone booth to call them. I didn't head toward my old house. I just sat there, reclaiming my own name, a name that didn't start with Mom or Resident Number 42. If you are watching this, look at the people who raised you. Not as your servants or your safety nets, but as human beings who are running out of sand in their hourglass. Do not wait for the funeral to bring flowers, and do not wait for the eulogy to say the words they need to hear today. Time doesn't forgive, and it certainly doesn't wait for you to grow a conscience. I am 93 years old, and I am currently a stranger in a city I once knew by heart. I don't know where I will sleep tonight, but for the first time in 427 days, I am not waiting for a knock on the door. I have finally learned that the most important person to never abandon is yourself. This is the truth they don't tell you about growing old. Your children might give you life, but they can also be the ones who take the meaning of it away, if you let them. Don't let the silence be the last thing they hear.